Hi, my name is Deirdre Chance, and I am doing video response 1 for Counseling 6323, Crisis Response and Trauma Care. First of all, the definition for collective trauma is a blow to the basic tissues of social life that damages the bonds attaching people together and impales the prevailing sense of community. The way that I would describe this definition of collective trauma to someone who has just gone through trauma would to be first discuss the societal implications of collective trauma. When there's been collective trauma, supportive resources, everyday resources in life are gone. Churches are impacted, and they're not there to provide the normal support that a person might otherwise be able to have. Even everyday things like grocery stores and restaurants are also impacted and damaged, and just having the ease to be able to get something to eat and get a little break, that is also gone. The community is unraveling due to this collective trauma in places that maybe one wasn't aware, where you might get support in society, in the day-to-day life of society, again, through your church, through your faith community, by having restaurants be able to come alongside and cook a meal for you, to have food easily and readily available at grocery stores, to have the community around you in disarray and impacted. All of those things are part of this collective trauma that breaks down the basic tissues of social life, that impacts the individual, but is it impacts the individual, but it's because the individual is embedded in a society that's been implicated as well. Another way I would describe collective trauma to someone who just gone through a disaster is, not only is this causing societal implications and removing those foundational societal supports one would naturally be able to access, but it's also impacting you personally. Pets may have died. What you would personally get support from the pets, that's gone, in addition to those previously discussed societal implications. Your home is also damaged. That would provide a sense of safety and a place of safety to go to. You know, when you take these societal and personal implications together, really what you see is one's sense of normalcy has been corrupted, has completely deteriorated from this collective trauma. Moving on, there's many ways that the mental health and well-being of individuals are impacted throughout disasters, throughout the different stages of disaster, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Some of the more serious ways that mental health well-being is impacted is suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts can certainly increase, particularly when one is in the disillusionment phase. You know, maybe there might be early on a lot of early efforts of help, you know, a great surge of help. But then if the disaster prolongs, resources wane, support wanes, and then suicidal attempts are inversely proportional to that. The more support there is, the less suicidal ideation. The less support as it pulls out, you see the suicidal ideation increasing. At a less acute and severe level, you also see depression and despair as the long-term nature of disaster happens. and sinks into people's lives as they start to realize it's not an option, that we're going to go back to the way things were before. And so that can impact mental health well-being. At the same time, though, there can also be an increase in resiliency and recovery as individuals start to see that they can create, though, their own new sense of normalcy. And then finally, the stages of disaster and how I would counsel someone as they go through the stages of disaster, how that would impact future professional counseling for disasters. The first stage is pre-disaster, and perhaps, no one is ever truly ready for a disaster, though theoretically we may attempt to be ready. So as much as one can, in theory, one tries to prepare for disaster, coming alongside community. This is a place where training with key church leaders can be important, providing that psychological first aid, because then when disaster, that can help preemptively. And then when and if disaster does strike, those faith communities can come alongside and provide additional help. The next phase is the disaster itself, and that can be short-term, it can be long-term, depending on the nature of the disaster. Hurricane Katrina was a longer disaster because there was the initial hitting of the hurricane and some urgent rescue disaster efforts made, and then the levees broke. And then so it prolonged the disaster. So that could be short-term or long-term. And then during that time, it's important to provide support and empathy, as well as safety and care for their basic needs. The next phase is the heroic phase, and that's the phase that's characterized by that strong initial onput of help. For the example with Hurricane Katrina, it would be, people being frustrated with the government and saying, you know what, we're just going to go in with our boats and help. It would be government services finally coming in and sending helicopters. It would be churches that housed 11,000 volunteers to help meet these crises needs. So that's the heroic phase. Then the honeymoon phase is where you see this continued ongoing outpouring of both volunteer efforts and care and support of rebuilding homes, teams coming alongside and providing haircuts and things like that. But then often what will happen if the disaster is prolonged is you'll enter that disillusionment phase that I mentioned earlier that can impact mental health well-being. And that's where maybe there's disaster somewhere else in the world that takes the nation's attention. Some pull out, maybe resources taper off or wane. And that can be a difficult time. And then finally, the last phase is reconstruction. And that can be a period of just entering into long-term recovery and resiliency. And again, where people sort of can pick themselves up, and then they can start to redefine, okay, maybe accept that I'm not going to get back to that sense of normalcy again, but I do have some ability, some control to define what the new normal will be for us. And so that's in the reconstruction phase. Thank you.